You are listening to Johnstown Live with Ralph Demarco on 1490 WNTJ News Talk Johnstown. Good morning, Johnstown Live listeners, and welcome to Johnstown Live. And our guest on today's show is Robert Jeschonek, award-winning author and Johnstown native. Robert, welcome to Johnstown Live.
Thanks for having me here. It's really exciting to be a part of this show.
Well, Robert, I would tell you that Johnstown Live is all about pauses and people doing great things in our communities. And you fit right into the category of, and I hope you take this as a compliment, Robert, as kind of like Johnstown has so many best-kept secrets. I've run into so many people doing so many wonderful things, not only locally but regionally, but nationally and internationally, and you fit that category quite well.
Wow, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that that you see me that way, because it's a great town to live in, and it's a great place to be creative and to do interesting things.
Well, Robert, we always kind of introduce our Johnstown Live guests to our listeners, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your journey. So just bear with me here, and I hope that some people blush when I do this, but we're on the radio and nobody knows that, okay?
Okay.
Robert Jeschonek was born in Johnstown, PA, graduated with a BA in journalism from the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. He has some radio experience, WWBR and WBEM AM. TV experience, director-producer, WJAC-TV Johnstown, WTAJ-TV, public relations experience, a director of public relations and marketing at Mount Aloysius College in Crescent, technical writing experience, MTS Technologies Johnstown, and you're going to have to fill in some blanks for me here, Robert.
Okay.
DIT Inc. in Johnstown, and
yeah.
A very diverse. You've done a lot of things here, and I want to go back to one thing before we talk too much about your journey.
Okay.
WWBR, that rings a bell for me. That was a radio station in Wimber, Pennsylvania, when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's right. WWBR, Wimber Radio. Yeah, it was a cool place to work, and it was still Wimber Radio when I was there, though we were located up the road a little bit. We were on Scalp Avenue. Yeah,
when I was a kid, it was in the Midway behind the train station there. The train station now, I believe, is actually the Borough Building, believe it or not.
Huh.
And I think I got that right.
Okay.
But I can remember that vividly, and I can remember being a young athlete in Wimber, and all the games were on the radio, and there was a guy by the name of Frank Donato who called all the games.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, when I was looking at your bio and I saw WWBR, I figured that was the Wimber Radio.
Yeah, yeah. When I started there, it was country music, and then they switched over to Love Radio. That was the format when I was still early in my time there, and then they changed over to talk radio.
Well, Robert, I think it's important for our Johnstown Live listeners to know about some of the awards and recognition that you've received, and then I would really like to talk about your journey and how we kind of ended up here today talking with you.
Sounds good.
In 2013, Scribe Award for the Best Original Novel, Tannhauser, Rising Sun, Falling Shadows, 2013 International Book Award for Cross Genre Fiction, Day 9, yep. 2012 Forward National Literature Award, My Favorite Band Does Not Exist, and Grand Prize for Pocketbook's Strange New Worlds Contest. And I know that we're going to be talking about some of the things that you've written and you have won awards for and things that have been published. But how about your journey, going back to being born and raised here in Johnstown, Pennsylvania? You can tell us a little bit about your journey and how you kind of ended up where you're at today.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was born in '65 here in Johnstown, and I've lived here most of my life. Growing up here, I had just so many wonderful experiences. It was great. I was actually, most of my life, I lived in Geistown and Richland. My grandfather
so you're a Richland Ram, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we're not going to hold that against you here on Johnstown.
Oh, okay. Hey, easy. Back off a little there, man. Let go of my sleeve. Jeez. Okay. Yeah, Richland Ram. And actually, my grandfather on my father's side worked at Richland High School. He was a maintenance man up there. His name was Carl Jeschonek, and a lot of your listeners might have heard of him or knew him back in the day. And then on my mother's side, my grandfather there was Bernard Heinrich, and he worked at Bethlehem Steel. My dad worked at U.S. Steel until that all sort of came apart. And my family just has long time roots here in steel and coal, My grandfather on my father's side, he and his brothers had a coal mine in the Richland area. And so...
Well, that's pretty cool. I never really knew anybody who had a coal mine. I knew there were coal mines, but that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a true story. Yeah, it was in a part of Richland that was called Walsall, sort of down near
I can't help you with that
Eisenhower, you know, sort of between. Anyway, it was a long time ago, but by the time I came along, it was already gone. It was shut down at that point. But so I have roots in the local manufacturing and industries, and I love the place. It's the kind of town where you can have a family and long-standing ties, and yet we're still moving forward. We're still changing and adapting, and there's a lot happening here. I think it's an exciting time to be living in Johnstown, even though we have lost some of the things that we knew and loved in the past. I think new things have come along, but it is a good idea, I think, to keep some of those memories alive, and that's one of the reasons that I write and work on some of the books that I do.
Well, Robert, I really appreciate the fact that you said that you believe that these are exciting times to be in Johnstown, and that you believe that good things are going to happen to Johnstown, because here at Johnstown Live, that's the way we believe. We see the glass being more than half full, and we believe that if we all pull together, Johnstown can, and I do believe it's headed that way. It can reclaim itself, regain itself, maybe not in the same vein as coal and steel. Not that there are not still coal and steel jobs here, and they're not important. They are important, but we have diversified what we are, and I believe we are moving in a positive direction.
Well, we've been talking about this for how long now? It's been for years. Ever since the 80s, I think we've been talking about diversification of the economic base, and I think we're finally starting to see some of that really take effect and really have an impact. Though, of course, we had a lot of defense industry that had come in the 80s and 90s, and we saw that build up, and then it sort of started to lose some momentum. But I think now some of those companies that came in at that time are still growing, and we've got some new companies coming in as well. And then some of the companies that sort of built up over that time with different economic models and different business models. And I think right now we're starting to see some of that diversification finally, and I think it's starting to take hold. So I'm looking forward to how that goes in the future. I think in the near future it's going to really start to pay off, and we're going to see some increased growth around here, I think.
And you know what? And I agree with you. And I think you make great points. And I just believe we have to believe in positive. We got to believe in good, because the alternative makes no sense to me. You run around with your head hanging on the ground all the time, and that's not a good way to go about your life either.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting though when you see, for example, I work downtown in my day job as a technical writer, and the downtown area is bustling. I mean, it's a busy area. It's a busy place. It's a different place from what it once was, but it's still a busy place. There are businesses there that are either new or old that have reshaped themselves in order to respond to today's needs. There are people with smaller ancillary businesses, and there are just a lot of people. There's a lot of traffic down there, and it's kind of interesting to see. I think it's even grown over the last couple of years.
And I think you used a great word when you said diversify and reshape ourselves, and I think that's important to the future of Johnstown and Cambria and Somerset County, and I believe that is happening.
Yeah.
Robert, you mentioned the downtown.
Yeah.
And I know that right now we could go in about 20 different directions, okay?
Yep.
And but I know that you have you're the author of a book called Christmas at Gloucester's, which we will talk about again in our conversation, but you have something special that you have happening. We've been talking about on Johnstown Live even before you came on the show. Can you talk a little bit about the book and about this picture and what's going to happen and how you're going to use the picture and how you need people to come out and be part of the picture?
Okay. Last year, I published a book called Christmas at Gloucester's, which you just mentioned, and it was a very successful project for me. I had a lot of great feedback from local people and people who once lived in the area and now have moved away, who just loved that and loved reading about the old Gloucester Brothers department store from downtown Johnstown. Since that time, and since that great response that I got, I decided to work on a nonfiction book that would go into more of the history of the store and what it meant to the community, and what it still means to the local community, not just Johnstown, but the whole local community, all the surrounding towns, because it was important to all of the local towns that, you know, that whose residents shopped there and went there and were part of that family. So anyway, I'm starting this book now. It's called Long Live Glossers. And it's about the history, the stories, the people who worked there, the people who started the store, and where it has gone since, and what has become of the town, and how we feel about Glossers now. And part of that book, one of the reasons for bringing that book out now is that it's the 25th anniversary of the closing of the store is coming up in this month, actually, May 26th. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing the book this year, to honor that anniversary. Now, as part of the book, I'm going to get as many Glosser employees as I can together for a group photo in front of the old Glosser building downtown in Johnstown on the corner of Franklin Street and Locust Street on Monday, May 26th at 10 a.m. And I would like to encourage your listeners, if they worked at Glossers or if they know someone who worked at Glossers, I'd like to encourage them to come down at 10 a.m. on Monday the 26th to participate in this photo. It will appear in the book, and we're going to take a number of other photos as well. It won't just be one group shot. We're going to shoot as many of the different people as we can and get them in the book and help them be a part of this project and this celebration.
So if you were an employee of Glossers, get down to downtown Johnstown on May 26th at 10 a.m. in front of the Glosser Brothers department store on the corner of Franklin and Locust Streets for this special picture that would be, you know, it's one time in the history. I mean, when you think about it, that's a one-time photo that would never happen again. It's going to be in your new book, and if they have any questions, they want to contact you. And I think I got your email right. It's
yes,
glosser.memories@piepresspublishing.com. So I think I have that right.
That's
okay?
exactly right. Thank you, Ralph. Yes.
And we're going to talk about this picture again at the end of our time for somebody who might be tuning in a little bit later.
Yeah.
But you know, Christmas at Glossers, and whenever I got your email and then we talked on the phone, there have been a few people that have emailed me, says, I'm going to be at the picture. Can you go through the information again? I've been talking about it on Johnstown Live prior to you and I, you know, sitting here doing Johnstown Live together.
Thank you.
So I think the word's getting out, at least a few people I know anyway.
Oh, thanks, Ralph.
Christmas at Glossers. Now, I'm a little bit older than you, so I'll go back even maybe a decade earlier than you. But I can remember, if I got it right, and if memory, you correct me if I'm wrong, that's okay. I've been wrong on Johnstown Live. Thursday night is when the city of Johnstown was open late. I want to say till 9 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock at the holidays. And there was I don't think it was the Glossers building, but I think it was the Penn Traffic building that had the animated Christmas, like had Santa Claus in there and he moved, and you know that was modern technology then. Okay?
Yeah.
And I can remember going to Glossers and shopping, and my mother subdued me by getting me a bag of cashews. That's the first thing I would smell when I would go in the store.
Yeah.
A bag, you know, the cashews. And my mother would give me the bag, and I was subdued then. I was a good little boy, and I did what I was supposed to do, and I had my cashews. So when I read this, it brought back a lot of memories for me.
Well, you know, I've heard people talk about how strong sense memory is, and how that's one of the things that you remember best if there's a smell that you associate with a place or a time. And that's absolutely how it is for the Glosser Brothers department store. If you talk to almost anyone, one of the first things that comes to their mind when they talk about Glossers is the smell of the roasting cashews and nuts from wherever the candy or nut counter was at that time. I think it moved around during the time the store was open. But that's absolutely one of the first things people remember. In fact, in my book, Christmas at Glossers, the first thing you read when you open the cover is you can practically smell the roasting nuts, because that's what people think of right away.
Wow, that's great. That is fantastic. So, what was your motivation? I mean, what motivated you to Glosser Brother? I mean, now see, I have 1,000 memories. I can remember on TV, watching TV, and the commercial was, we're all going to Glossers.
Oh, yeah.
We're all going to Glossers, okay? So you got me going now.
Wow. Yeah. Well, like yourself, I have great memories of that place from when I was young, from when I used to go there with my grandparents or my parents and shop. And the one time a year when I think most about this is Christmas, because it just comes to mind, because we used to go down there and look at the display windows where the Christmas decorations would be placed and the different displays there. And we'd go in for the sales, and there'd be all kind of decorations inside the store. And it was just the one time a year when we spent probably the most time at Glosser's, and I always thought about that. And so as I've gotten older and the holidays have rolled around each year, every time Christmas came around, I would think about Glosser's. And my wife, Wendy, she would always talk about it as well. And she really kept saying, you know, I really miss Glosser's. I miss that, don't you? And I said, yeah, you know, I do. And everyone we talk to of a certain age who's old enough to remember the store remembers it fondly and thinks about it during Christmas time, during the holiday season. So she kept saying, you know, you ought to write something about this because it would make a great book of some kind. And I put it off, and then finally last year I wrote it, and it was very well received.
Now, what if you open up? What's in the book? What is it, like people's memories? Is it what is the content of your book, Christmas at Glosser's?
Okay, Christmas at Glosser's is a fiction story. It's a short story, and it is just a story about a little boy who has an adventure at the store. He's trying to figure out where his grandfather goes on Christmas Eve every year. His grandfather disappears every Christmas Eve. And he follows him one Christmas Eve, and he ends up in the Glosser Brothers store. And as he follows him through the store, we get a tour of the place, and we see the different departments and the different floors, the escalator, the candy counter, the magazines, you know, the furniture department, the men's furnishings, the women's clothes, whatever, the cafeteria. And the little boy eventually has sort of a magical adventure that's related to finding his grandfather. And two people help him to find his grandfather, and they're actually two real-life people who were important in Glosser Brothers department store. They worked in the cafeteria. They're the Schaefer twins, Ruth and Ruby. Almost everybody who went in the store, who went to the cafeteria, remembers them because they would dress alike. They worked there for many years. They were very, very nice. And whenever you would order something, they would always say, "And what else?" after you had placed your order. So they are two of the stars of that story. They helped the little boy to find his grandfather, and that's what it's about. Now, actually, it's interesting. One of them is going to be a part of this photograph on the 26th. Ruby Schaefer has indicated that she's going to come downtown and help us with the photo. So if you have fond memories of her and you just want to say thank you or just see her and talk to her, she'll be there.
Robert, I had 1,000 memories as you were talking, okay?
Okay.
I hope I don't start breaking down crying here on Johnstown Live. The older you get, the more nostalgic you get, I guess. I guess that's an old, you know, the good old days type thing. But for me, they were the good old days, and that's everybody's going to have their own good old days.
Sure.
What a great, neat storyline with Christmas at Glosser's. Now you've got the nonfiction book, and I would assume that's going to be very factual. Is that how that's going to work?
Absolutely. The new book, Long Live Glosser's, is a nonfiction book. It's going to be about the history of the store, the story of the family who opened the store and who operated it for so many years, why it's important to the community. We're going to talk about some of the history. We're going to talk about some of the mysteries, things that people don't know about Glosser's, even though they might have gone there so many times in the past. And also, we're going to talk about the family, the people who worked there and who ran the place. We're going to say, where are they now? We're going to tell people what happened to the Glosser family, where they went after the store ended. So we're going to tell the story of the store from beginning to end, and also have a lot of local people's stories and anecdotes. So people who worked there, people who shopped there, we're going to have their memories in the book. So it's nonfiction, and it's a book about the store and about the town.
Robert, I'm amazed, but it doesn't surprise me that somebody from our area would feel so emotionally strong that they needed to do something. You know, Christmas at Glosser's is is the nonfiction book that was published in November.
Or that was the fiction, yeah.
Yeah, that was the fiction book, excuse me. The nonfiction book is, when will it be out? Do you know exactly when it'll be out?
October of this year.
October of this year. And so if you were an employee of Glosser's, on May 26th, there's going to be a photo taking place at 10 a.m. in front of the Glosser Brothers Department Store on the corners of Franklin and Locust Streets in downtown Johnstown. We invite all of you to go down, take the picture. The picture is going to be part of the book that's coming out in October, correct?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And if you appear in the photo, your name will be there. We'll list you. We might even talk to you while you're on the scene and see if we can get some of your stories or memories to include in the book. And I do want to mention, I already said that Ruby Schaefer has said she'll be there. We're also going to have Bill Glosser, who was one of the Glosser Brother Department Store people back from the day. He was human resources manager and also corporate information officer, and he was in charge of the security department. He will be there, and he was really an important figure, and he just loved the store so much. He's a local attorney. He loved the store so much. He's helping me out as far as providing stories and information. He will be there. And also, I just talked to a gentleman last night. His name is Bill Hritz, and he used to operate the parking lots at Glosser's. He provided valet parking for 25 cents back in the 1950s. So if you gave him a quarter, he would take your car, park it in one of the lots, and let it sit there for 2 hours while you went in and shopped at the store. So valet parking for a quarter, that's not bad. He'll be there too.
Yeah, we won't even go there, huh?
I know. Can you
25
imagine?
cents, my gosh. Yeah, I got 1,000 stories about prices of things, but we don't want to digress too far here. But if you have any questions for Robert, you can email him at glosser.memories@piepresspublishing.com. And Robert, we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
You know, we talked about the books and we talked about the picture, but we're going to come back to that. And we want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Johnstown Live with Ralph Demarco on 1490 WNTJ, the news talk station in Johnstown. Our guest is Robert Jeschonek, award-winning author, Johnstown native, a writer whose fiction, comic essays, and podcasts have been published around the world. Robert, I'd really like to talk about some of your notable publications and maybe a little bit of the motivation for being involved in those publications. Then we're going to come back to the Glosser story, because I think that is a very important part of why we're talking today on Johnstown Live. You have a fiction book. We talked about that, Christmas at Glosser's. Now, if I get something wrong, you correct me. Okay, you're allowed to do that on Johnstown Live, all right? Because I get things wrong all the time. Fear of Rain.
Yeah.
The Masked Family, and Death by Polka.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I realize that, you know, we have a lot to talk about, but if you could just talk about maybe what they're about, motivations, why you wrote them.
Okay. Well, those 3 books in particular are all set in and around Johnstown. And I wrote them and set them in the local area because I know the local area so well and I love it so well. And I thought these stories would fit perfectly in this location. Fear of Rain is a fantasy book. It's actually a short story that was published first in England in a magazine called Postscripts. It went on to be nominated for a British Fantasy Award, and it was published in Russia. Also, it was translated into Russian, which is kind of cool to see. It was published in a science fiction magazine there. And it's about a character named Mr. Flood. And he's a supernatural figure who has the power to bring the rain.
Mr. Flood.
That is correct.
Okay.
So if you were unhappy with any of the floods that we've had locally, he's the man to talk to because he was responsible for them. And in this story, he decides that he wants to bring a 4th flood down upon the city. But his protege, who he's been training, she doesn't want that to happen, so she tries to stop him. And in the end, they have a climactic confrontation atop the Johnstown Incline Plane. So it's a pretty cool story. And in fact, Mr. Flood appears in Christmas at Glosser's, the book that came out just last year. So Fear of Rain is one of my local books. Another is The Masked Family, and that's set primarily in the Cambria County area, though it also has a Johnstown connection. And the main focus of that book is a real-life incident that happened in Lilly in 1924. There was a KKK siege of the town of Lilly in 1924. They came in on a train, cut the power to the town, and shut everything down, and they were trying to intimidate local miners of Eastern European descent. So that's sort of at the heart of the book. Then it ends up taking place mostly in the present day, but that's a big part of the book, a big part of the story. So the Mast family, right? That's one of them. And then also Death by Polka. Death by Polka, as you can tell from the title, is about a polka-related murder case. And it's more of a lighthearted mystery, what we call a cozy mystery, if you've ever heard of those. Sort of like an Agatha Christie level kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun. It's about, it's set in Johnstown. All the characters are fictional, but it does involve the local polka scene and a local polka superstar who ends up being murdered, and his daughter comes to town to solve the crime. So it has all the polka-related stuff in there that you could want. Lots of pierogies, halushki, halupki, you name it. It's all the good foods are in there, and the music, and it's definitely set in this place and in that world. And so it's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun writing it.
You know, it's amazing. I can polka dance because you learn it when you're a little kid. You go to all the, you know, whenever I grew up in Johnstown, when you went to a wedding reception, there was a live band there, and if they didn't play a few polkas, they were in a lot of hot water, and that's how I learned how to polka. My grandmother took me out there and taught me how to dance the polka.
That's right. Good for you.
Have you ever been accused of having a vivid imagination, Robert?
Yeah. Yes, I have. Yes, yes. Too vivid sometimes.
Well, no, that's okay. I'm really enjoying this. Your motivation. I mean, just because, you know, I think we both we care and love about Johnstown, our region, our area, Cambria, Somerset County. Is that your motivation? I mean, and when do you find the time to do this? Because you mentioned you had a day job.
Yeah, well, it's all about the moonlighting. You know, I mean, I have a full-time day job, so this work takes place in the evenings and on the weekends. The writing, I have to be very disciplined, force myself to sit down for a certain period of time each night at the same time, and force those fingers onto the keyboard and make the story happen, because otherwise, yeah, I would never get anything done. And it also helps that I have a very understanding wife, very supportive.
I get that.
She's a teacher in a local school district, and she's very helpful. She actually serves as my first reader and editor, also because she has great story sense. She's able to read my stories and books and say, you know, I noticed that this one character did something back in chapter 3, and now you have her doing something contradictory in chapter 9. You might want to fix that. So she's real helpful with that sort of thing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So she's very understanding and supportive, and she's also very helpful to the whole enterprise. So, but yeah, I've always been a writer ever since I was a little kid. It's just the one thing that I've always wanted to do. It's always been consistent for me. I have this imagination and this ability, and I love to write stories and books. And of course, it was a natural. I mean, I've written stories and books set in other places as well. But it's of course was a natural for me to write things that were set here in Johnstown, because they say write what you know and write where you're from, and of course, that's not the only thing that you write about, but it's one of the things that you can write about if you love a place enough, which I do love this place.
Well, Robert, and you may or may not know this. I don't know all the circles that you run in, obviously, but
okay.
I probably have had, and I'm going to take, you know, round numbers, I've had at least 6 guests on Johnstown Live who are local authors who have written, okay? There's a husband and wife. Their last name is Gindelsberger. They write about the Civil War and Gettysburg, and a lot of their books are actually, a couple of their books on Gettysburg are required reading if you get employed at the Gettysburg battlefield as an employee there, no matter what your job is, okay? And they don't live too far away from where we're standing right now. Another fella, Joe Moore, has written some children's books, okay? One of his most recent was... I'll get it wrong. It's about a raindrop that wouldn't fall. It's a children's book.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And so there are a lot of talented people in our area, and I think that sometimes we don't realize all the talent that is here because we take it for granted sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is something that we could talk about for like umpteen hours. We could really have
I'm
like a
with you.
long, and maybe we should have another discussion about this sometime in the future, because
I'd love to.
it's an exciting time. I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a writer, and it makes it possible the way things have happened with digitization and with ebooks and online book sales and audiobooks and everything has changed. It's so much more possible. I'm not going to say easy, but it's so much more possible for people from an area like this to still write and publish and be successful in that industry, which it might not have been quite that way, quite as possible in years gone by.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm going to jump around now on my script here a little
Okay.
bit. With electronic means and electronic technology, it just seems that it cuts through a lot of the red tape. You can sort of become your own publisher to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about that, and I know that in some of the notes that you sent me, you have over 100 ebooks, paperbacks, audiobooks that are available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Google, Books A Million, Audible, and other outlets.
Yeah.
I mean, it sort of boggles my mind. I mean, you obviously do spend a lot of time doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really time consuming. But if you love it enough, you make the time, and you force yourself to be disciplined and create and make these things happen. But you're right. It's the electronic media have changed things so dramatically. You can now write something, you can publish it as an ebook, put it up on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever, and people can pay you money for it, and you get a percentage of the money that they pay. And you couldn't do that years ago, of course. But it's not just ebooks. It's also, as you said, audiobooks and paperbacks. It's unbelievable. You can actually go online through these different websites, and you can produce your own audiobook or produce your own paperback. And paperbacks especially, things have really changed there, because it used to be, of course, that you could publish your own work. That's not something new, right? But thanks to these different outfits that exist online, you can publish them on demand. So in other words, you don't have to have an inventory of books sitting in your garage for umpteen years, taking up space and taking up your money. You can just take orders online, and people will buy the book, and then the company that creates the book will print it and send it off to the people who ordered it. And it's so easy, and you get your money, and it's great. It works really well.
And, you know, you mentioned that, and I have a gentleman that was on. He's a Vietnam veteran.
Oh, wow.
And he was on Veterans Day.
Okay.
And he's going to be back on Memorial Day. He actually lives in Florida. And we kind of hooked up with each other through, somebody knows somebody, you know how that goes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've chatted with him on the phone, and he wrote a book about his memories in Vietnam. Some of it sad, and some of it rather funny, rather amusing, believe it or not. And he did exactly what you did with his book, and he said it's been very productive for him.
Yeah, it's great. Things have changed in so many ways. And again, I'm not going to say it's easy, because it's very time consuming, and we have different issues now that are more related to how to get the word out about your work, how to help people find it, people who might be interested in reading it. But still, it's much more possible now than it ever was before, because it used to be you had to find a publisher, and you had to convince them to buy your book or your story and publish it, and that was the only way. That was your only option. Now, of course, that's still the case today. You can still go to the traditional route, as we say, and you still need to persuade an editor, a publisher, an agent, whatever, to help you get your book published if you choose to go that way. But if you don't, you can do it yourself and be successful at it. Some people are extraordinarily successful at it, and it's very possible.
Well, like you said, these are exciting times, and these are times where the best is still ahead of us. That's how I look at it, and I think that you have the same attitude about that.
Yeah.
Going back to some other notable publications, and like I said, if I get something wrong, Robert, you correct me. That's okay here on Johnstown Live. We don't stand on a lot of ceremony here, okay?
Okay.
You were involved with some Star Trek and Doctor Who fiction? Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, a
Being
number.
an old Trekkie that I am.
Oh, are you? Good for you.
Yeah, a closet Trekkie. Okay.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
You
my
got the
friend.
salute just right. That's
Yeah.
pretty. That's pretty awesome. Just don't.
I had to work on that. That wasn't easy. Okay, but I was a kid when the original series came out.
Oh,
Captain
man.
Kirk and the whole crew, and
Yeah.
never missed it. Just never missed it.
I loved it too. I loved it too. Just don't try the Vulcan neck pinch on me. I'm not. We're not going to go
I don't
there.
pinch anybody anymore because they always get me in trouble.
That's the best policy. Yes, Ralph, definitely. Yeah, it was a number of years ago. They had I actually got started with Star Trek through a writing contest that was called Strange New Worlds. And you could, and this was back before all the ebooks and things, so this was back in the day of just straightforward traditional publishing, and for the most part. So anyway, they had a contest. It was called Strange New Worlds. It was a nationwide contest, and anybody could write a story and submit it, and if they liked the story well enough, they would publish it in an anthology called Strange New Worlds. And it was also a contest, so if you could either be an honorable mention or you could win a prize. They had 3 top prizes. And the first time out of the gate, I won 3rd prize. So then I got in it one time, and then I was published the next time as an honorable mention. And then in the volume 6, Strange New World 6, I got the grand prize for the entire country. So it was a story that was very well received, and it led to some other assignments for pocket books in the Star Trek universe. And it was so cool to write because, like you, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I just loved writing those characters and getting to play in that universe. So I have a couple of things out there, an ebook called The Cleanup and some other publications as well. And then that, in turn, led me to other work in other universes with other editors, such as the universe of Doctor Who. I got to write a story for an anthology about Doctor Who a while back, too, and that was great as well because I love that show, especially the newer incarnations, and that was a lot of fun. And so, yeah, that's the story of Doctor Who and Star Trek.
It's amazing, too, when you get involved in those things, like even some of the lines of Star Trek, they creep into your world. I can remember, beam me aboard, Scotty.
Yeah.
Well, when your buddies were picking you up, like they would, I'm going to beam you aboard, I'll be there in 5 minutes type thing, okay? But that's when you had landlines and you didn't have cell phones and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, man.
But, some of the lines we can't go into right now here
Right,
on Johnstown Live. Batman and Justice Society. I used to read the Batman comic books until, I think I wore the covers off of them, reading the same comic book over and over and over again.
Me too. Boy, when I was a little kid, that was one of my favorite things to do, was to read comic books. In fact, that's one of the things that I loved best about Glosser's department store. I used to go there with my grandfather, and they had marked down comic books in bags. They were plastic bags, and it would take the covers off of them, and they would sell them for a low price. And I'd buy these bags of like 3 comic books for, I don't know what it was, $0.25 or something.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember
I
this.
used to love that. So a lot of those were Batman and the different superheroes. In fact, yeah, Batman, Justice Society, Justice League, all that stuff. So I've always loved those characters, and I've always loved DC Comics and Marvel Comics as well. I've always wanted to work for them. And a couple years back, I did get an opportunity to write for them. I wrote a story for a Justice Society comic. I worked on a couple of other projects that didn't quite work out for one reason or another. But then last year, I wrote a Batman story that was published by DC Comics online. It's one of their digital books. It's called Legends of the Dark Knight. And this particular one was issue number 52. It was a lot of fun to write. And, I mean, the little kid in me was just jumping up and down and screaming the whole time because he was so excited, because this was, something I had always loved.
Don't let that little kid ever get out of there. Just keep him in there and enjoy the heck out of him.
I know, right?
That's what it's all about.
Boy, isn't it wonderful, though, when you get to fulfill something, a dream of yours from when you were young, something that you've always wanted to do. I mean, you've told me about some of your sports experience and some of your experience in the teaching world and also in radio. I mean, I'll bet a lot of these things are things that you wanted to do when you were much younger, and you probably had these dreams, especially maybe in the sports world, and then you got to fulfill them. It's just so wonderful.
I'm living my dream, to be very honest with you, Robert. I am living the dream, and I tell people that and it all starts with your attitude. It all starts with how you're going to approach the world.
That's a really good thing to mention is, you know, your mental attitude, how you look at things, and how you know, for me, I've had a lot of accomplishments on the writing side and the publishing side, but, you know, there's so much more that I want to do, and it's difficult sometimes because in this realm, in writing and publishing, it can take a long time, and it always takes a lot of work, almost always, to succeed and to achieve all those things that you want to achieve. But I always try to keep in mind that it is the dream, it is the quest itself that matters, and that's a good thing, I think, to apply to your everyday life in so many different ways.
Another title I'm going to throw at you. My favorite band does not exist. It won the Forward National Literature Award and was named one of Booklist's top 10 first novels for youth.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay. That's a young adult novel, a young adult fantasy novel of alternate realities and time travel and space travel and rock and roll.
Yeah, you don't have any imagination, do you, Rob?
That one was a lot of fun, I'll tell you. I loved writing that book. It was just, I had these characters. One character is aware that he's a character in a book, and he is reading this book that's sort of connected to an alternate reality where there's another character who's aware of his existence, and they sort of interact. So it was a lot of fun. There's the one character who's reading this book. He creates a fake band online. He creates a hoax about this band that never really existed, but the band does exist in an alternate reality. So the two realities sort of start to come together, and this character and the guy who's in the band in the other reality sort of interact. So it's complicated, but it's a lot of fun.
You have a lot of fun being alive, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
No, I mean, I sincerely mean that. I mean that with all due respect. You enjoy being alive, and that's good. I'm feeling very, very motivated right now, and very positive and very upbeat. It's amazing. You've written a lot, you've accomplished a lot in your life, and it seems like you're having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I really am. And like I said, I always try to keep in mind it's the journey that's important, and it's the quest, and it's the dream. And sometimes it's easy to forget that, but I do try to keep that in mind.
Well, you know, and Johnstown Live is all about positives and positive attitudes, and you've brought your positive attitude with you today, and I get the feeling it's with you every day.
Thank you. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Robert, is there anything that maybe we did, because I'd like to now, you know, our time's going to wind down a little bit, okay? And I want to get back to the Christmas at Glossers and that whole story there and the picture. I want to get back to that.
Okay.
Is there something else that maybe project you were involved in that you'd like to share with our Johnstown Live listeners? Is there something that maybe I tried to touch upon most of it, but we may have missed something that you'd like our listeners to know about what you're involved with or you were involved with?
Well, the thing that I'm most excited about right now is definitely Long Live Glossers, that book that's taking shape that you just mentioned, with the photo opportunity on the 26th at 10 a.m. in front of the store downtown. It's really captured my imagination, and it's really interesting. And if I could just talk about that for a minute, I'm sort of keeping an eye on the time too.
No, you know what? You don't worry about that. You take your time, and whatever you want to get out here on Johnstown Live today, we'll stay here all day if we have to.
Well, in that case, make yourself comfortable, Ralph.
I got to pull up a chair now.
Pour me another cup of that Joe over there. One of the things that the most excites me about this book is that once I started doing the research on it, I realized that it was like putting together a puzzle, because when the store closed 25 years ago, a lot of the things and people all sort of went their separate ways. There wasn't as much of an effort to sort of keep everything in one place as maybe you might have liked if you wanted to research it. So it's been interesting because I've had to reach out to all kinds of different people to get information and to get photos and stories, and it's been really fun because every time you talk to one person, they'll say, oh, here's 3 or 4 more people to talk to. And so at first it looked like maybe I didn't have as many sources and as much information and material as I would have liked, but then as I've gotten and worked on it more, it's turned out to be this great puzzle and this great adventure exploring the story of this place that we all know so well. I mean, it's such a cool place, right? We don't have anything quite the same today, I don't think. though maybe people today might feel differently. Young people might have their own special places.
Well, yeah, I think it's all relative to the experiences that you have when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. How many young people now didn't grow up without a cell phone?
I know, that's amazing.
So
Scary.
they've got a whole different viewpoint on how we see the world, but
Yeah.
we have something that we could connect with the Glosser Brothers store, and for me, it's the cashews.
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm writing the book too, is to preserve this story for these people, for younger people who don't necessarily know about the store. They've maybe seen the building, they've maybe heard their older folks going on about it a little bit and heard some stories, but they don't really know what it's all about. So this book is going to help them to understand a little bit more what the place was and why it was so special to so many people. So it's that kind of thing. And plus there's this great story at the heart of this. The thing that drives this whole book is that it's the story of an American family. It's the story that's shared by so many families in this country. Immigrants who came to this country with very little and were able to succeed through the American dream, through the Johnstown dream, become something, help the local community, contribute in so many ways, mean so much to so many people. And then when the story ended and the family went their separate ways, they spread out across the country. And they went on to do other things and set up other enterprises. And so they're very representative of the American dream and the Johnstown story, because so many people here have moved on and spread out and done exciting things in other places. So it's just an exciting story to me, and I'm really glad that I'm having the opportunity to tell it.
Well, you're listening to Johnstown Live with Ralph Demarco on 1490 WNTJ News Talk in Johnstown. Our guest is Robert Jeschonek, award-winning author and Johnstown native. And Robert, I would tell you that Johnstown Live is all about positives and great things in our community, and you fit that category to the bill. It's quite obvious that you have a vivid imagination. You're a very positive person. You come from the cloth of hard work, obviously, which is Johnstown, and our Johnstown community is built on. You know, my dad used to always tell me, he says, the other guy might be better than you, but don't let him outwork you. I can remember my dad telling me, and I think you have that in your heart and in your soul, and I believe that your soul is all about positive and good things, and you care about people. And I would tell you that for our Johnstown Live listeners, you've written a book, Christmas at Glossers, which was published last November. That is a fiction story, and you're currently working on a nonfiction book about Glosser Brothers department stores, and that's coming out in October.
Yes.
But you've got this picture on May 26th at 10 a.m. in front of the Glosser Brothers department store on the corners of Franklin and Locust Streets for anyone who is an employee of Glosser Brothers to come down there, and this picture will be part of your book coming out in October.
Yes.
And if anybody has any questions, they can email you at glosser.memories@piepresspublishing.com. And Robert, I give you some how about some final thoughts, and then we're going to say our goodbyes here on Johnstown Live.
Okay. Yeah, I'm excited about the book, and I've got some really cool surprises in store. I shouldn't even mention it because I don't want to talk about them right now, but I'll sort of hint at them because, oh my God, I got some cool stuff related to this book and this project when it's published in October. So I hope people keep an eye open for it, because it'll be an eye-opening project, and I just, I'm really excited about the whole thing. I want to spill the beans, but I'm going to hold back a little bit. But I will say that I'm getting a lot of the Glosser family members who were involved in the store to tell me their stories, and I'm getting a lot of local employees to tell me their stories, and people who just shop there. So I'm trying to reflect everyone's experience for whom Glossers meant so much for so long. And if people just have stories too about the store, they can find me on Facebook even and just post the story or send me whatever information they want, and that'd be cool too. So I'm really excited. I'm very grateful to you for having me on and giving me an opportunity to talk about this project and to invite people to be a part of it. So thank you, Ralph.
Well, make a promise to me here, Robert, that whenever it gets close, when the book's going to be published in October, that you'll come back, even if we talk for 10 or 15 minutes about the book and how people can get the book and how it's available, and maybe give a little bit of a little more about what it's about. I know you don't want to give it all away. That's never a good thing to do. Okay, but promise me you're going to come back in October.
Wow, thank you. That's very generous of you, and I look forward to coming back. I've had a great time.
Robert, thanks for being on Johnstown Live.
Thank you.
You're listening to Johnstown Live with Ralph Demarco on 1490 WNTJ News Talk, Johnstown.